Hi everybody and welcome to week 11. Week 11 is where we are looking at module 8. Now module 8 is an important module for us because module 8 is where you will find all the information you need, or most of the information you need, to do your final assessment where you are evaluating some research using a particular framework. The framework that you use is introduced in this week. So let's go and have a quick look at it, and I'm going to make another video about the assessment itself so I can go into that in a lot more detail, but for now I just wanted to show you what's in module 8 and why it's important. So let's just jump in and have a little look. Okay, so this module looks at the 6 steps in research evaluation, which is exactly what you need to do for your assessment. So there's a whole lot of stuff to read. There's lots of things for you to jump out into as well. The textbook has a lot of stuff in this. Then we start looking at these 6 steps. So the first step there, validity and reliability, or credibility and transferability. And these concepts have big words, but they're actually not that hard. And the point that we're making here is that the type of research that you're reading has different evaluation processes. So the first step you'd need to do is to work out the piece of research that you're trying to evaluate. You'd need to work out what sort of research is this. So now you're going back to the very start of this subject and thinking, okay, is this qualitative, is it quantitative? Is it positivist or post-positivist, or is it interpretivist? And based on those answers, that would then trigger off a particular method of evaluation. So obviously if you're evaluating something that's highly quantitative, so it's full of statistics and numbers, then the way you would evaluate the quality of that research will be very different to the way you would evaluate a piece of research that was more sort of narrative based, or telling stories, or having an interpretation of people's comments. So much more that sort of qualitative focus. So keep that in mind when you're working with your assessment, that the very first thing you need to think about is, okay, well, what is this research? Where does it fit in terms of its paradigm and its qualitative versus quantitative, and therefore what steps would you have to start thinking about for each of those different types of research? Okay, step 2 is looking for necessary components. So really good research has particular things within it that you would look for. So these are the sort of the general structures that you would look for in a piece of scholarly research. And of course this differs according to the type of thing that's been written, but generally these elements are what you would look for in a really nice piece of research. And then step 3 are the goals of the research, the problem that they was trying to solve. Are they really clearly stated? Is it obvious to see what this article set out to do, or what this research that the article is writing about set out to do? Is that really clear? Because if you haven't got a really clear picture of what this thing was trying to solve, or the problem that was trying to solve, then it's really hard to evaluate whether it did it or not, whether the actual research solved the problem or not. So when you're looking through a piece of research, you want to look at right at the top. They should state, this is the problem we had, this is how we try and solve it. Or this is the problem that we tried to solve, and this is why it was important for us to do that. So that whole idea of really clear goals right at the sort of beginning of a piece of research reporting is something worth looking out for. Then there's a literature review. The literature reviews are there to sort of show that the person who's writing this research knows enough about the relevant literature to be able to have an informed view about the problem or the topic that's being written about. So it's sort of providing context and showing a level of understanding on the basis of the person who's done the research and is writing it up. A good literature review should have a triangle shape. Now I'll explain that. So what we mean by that is that at the top of the literature review, so the very first bit of it, should be really, really broad focused, really big, maybe global context about this particular issue. And then as the literature review progresses, it starts to get narrower. So at sort of the middle point, you might be saying, okay, well, this is how it is in the world, but this is how it is in Australia. And then as you get right down to the pointy bit of the literature review, then you're saying, so the problem that I've got is this. So this is how it's done in the world, this is how it's done in Australia, this is what we don't know, so the actual problem I'm trying to solve is there, right at the bottom of the literature review. So starting off really broad, and then as they write further and further, they get narrow the context, narrow the focus of the literature until you get right down to the spot where it says, this is what we don't know. This is how it's done before, but this is what we need to know now. And then that leads into the research question about what it is that they're trying to solve. So it should all just lead into that point. And of course then you look for good references and citations. If a piece of research isn't backed up by really good references and the arguments aren't supported by existing knowledge really well, then you've got to start questioning the quality of that research. So that's the idea of references being up to date, being relevant, being the researcher using resources from highly reputable authors, or maybe even if you're looking at, say, the Australian context of something, would you then use resources that related to another country? Sometimes it doesn't matter, sometimes it does. So depending again on what problem they're trying to solve in their research, and they're looking at sort of the relevance of the resources that they're using and referencing is really important too. An appropriate research design. If you're trying to solve a particular problem, there's going to be an optimal way of doing that. So if what you need to look at when you're evaluating research is the way they went about finding their answer appropriate to the answer that they were looking for. And this is a good article to read for that. It's quite old now, but the principles are really good. So that one's worth having a look at. And these questions here are worth looking at when you're looking at the whole concept of the research design. How appropriate is it? So have they designed their research in a way that's actually going to answer their question well or not? And that's it. So that is the content for this week. There's some more, that's all the references down there. But what I'm going to do is, so what I'd like you to do is to work through this module, but before you do that, I think you should go over and have a look at the final assessment, just so you've got your head around what it is you have to do before you start looking at this content in too much depth, because I think it'll help you think about what you need to learn out of this once you know exactly what you're trying to achieve in your assessment. So what I'm going to do is go and make another video about the assessment, and as soon as I've got that done, I'll post that up as well, and perhaps look at those two things in tandem this week, and that will help you work through this particular module and also help you get started on your assessment. I hope this helps. I'll be in touch soon. See ya.